welcome to another exciting episode of the Adventures in Advising podcast. This is Matt Markin, and we are at episode 96 on our way to episode 100. Our guest today is someone I've known for a few years, but only as an employee of the NACADA organization, but recently realized how involved they have been in higher education prior to NACADA, and that is Joan Krush. Joan Krush was a first-generation transfer student who got involved in higher education as an undergraduate summer orientation leader and admissions office tour guide. She holds a BS in Contemporary Media and Journalism from the University of South Dakota and an MA in Student Development in Post-Secondary Education from the University of Iowa. A NACADA member since 2005, Joan worked as a professional academic advisor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, where she advised biochemistry majors in the College of Arts and Sciences, as well as majors in the College of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources. While at UNL, she was the first professional advisor to receive the Outstanding Undergraduate Student Advisor Award in the College of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources. In addition, she received the Certificate of Recognition for significant contributions to students by UNLV Parents Associations in 2005, 2006, 2007, and 2008. She also co-taught a career opportunities in biochemistry course to beginning biochemistry majors and taught food, agriculture, and natural resource systems courses to first-year students in the college. In fall 2009, Joan began advising undergraduates in the College of Sciences and Mathematics at North Dakota State University, where she also taught a Skills for Academic Success course. As a professional academic advisor in the Department of Computer Science, she received NDSU's 2014 Award for Excellence in Academic Advising for undergraduates. And Joan also received the NACADA Outstanding New Advisor Award for the Academic Advising Primary Role category in 2008, and the NACADA Outstanding Advisor Award, Academic Advising Primary Role category in 2015. Joan Krush joined the NACADA Executive Office and Kansas State University in December 2019 as Assistant Director for Member Engagement, having previously served on a contract basis as project manager for the NACADA Region Review Project. Joan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad that this worked out, that we have you on for the podcast. I know we'll for sure talk about NACADA stuff, but I thought it would be great to talk more about you and your background. And again, like I was saying at the beginning, I've known you only as Joan from NACADA, but finding out about your background, I was like, oh, we got to get Joan on here.
Oh, you're sweet. Thanks. No, this is a real privilege. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. So, Joan, tell us more about you. I know we heard from your bio about that you were a transfer student. You've worked in admissions and advising. Tell us more about your path into higher ed.
Thanks. Well, South Dakota is my home state, so you'll get a pattern here of Midwest travels for me. But as a first generation college student, I wanted to go to college and navigate that environment. And I found an opportunity at a small private college where I wanted to do writing or mass communication, and then I ended up transferring and getting a degree and headed out to the workforce. But my undergraduate experiences in the college setting were in recruitment and working for the admissions office and giving tours and talking to prospective students. And that was something that I found a lot of joy in. And so I wanted to pursue that as a career, stay in the college setting. And so I found a job, entry-level position in admissions, and worked for a small private college and learned a lot there, got to meet and work with some great families and students, and found out that it was about the fit. It was finding students and talking about my institution and having them feel like this is where they belong, this is where they see themselves, this is where they can launch their careers from that undergraduate experience. And I had an opportunity to work at a variety of small private colleges at the time and traveled all across the Midwest. The thing that I really found that was foundational is that transformation that students make from that high school student, that high school graduate, and coming into the college setting, finding out about themselves and finding their people, and then wanting to just launch their career from there. And so I really valued that, and it was great to be a part of that experience. I also started a master's program while I was working in admissions, and then ended up doing that full time. And once I got my master's degree in student development, I was really trying to decide if I wanted to do admissions or advising, and ended up continuing with my role in admissions and recruitment. And then I had an opportunity at a new institution to be paired with someone who was a mentor on the campus. And so we sat and met frequently, but she was an academic advisor. And that for me was transformational. All of her work and her comments about opportunities and meeting with students and helping them grow and develop their path was something that really resonated with me. And so then I made the transition into academic advising. And that was something that was certainly a risk for me, but I also recognized it was a risk for the department that hired me as a full-time professional advisor, because I, of course, had the admissions and recruitment experience, but didn't have as much advising. And so they took a chance on me and helped guide me and were great mentors. And that was an experience that I had at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and the biochemistry department. And I can't say enough about the faculty there who really guided me and were mentors. And then also the other academic advising professionals on campus that just surrounded me with care and nurturing. And we helped each other through and learned a lot about what works best for students and worked collaboratively. And that's something that I carry on with me into my work here at NACADA. So that's something that I think, as we're talking about fit and we're talking about collaboration, those are all themes that are very transferable and that I feel like have guided me through my career and my path and ended up here in the executive office.
And I feel like I'm connecting with you more because I used to work in admissions as well. And I feel like my transition from admissions to advising was kind of very similar in the sense of also not knowing, like having the admissions background, but not necessarily like the advising background, but I had the transferable skills to learn it, which I do want to ask you about, because you were mentioning risk of going from, admissions to advising and then taking a chance on you. What was that transition like? Like for me, when I first started, I thought I had enough that I was like, oh, I'll just kind of smooth right into this position. And then I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to advising. I really had like the informational piece in admissions, but I had so many other things I had to learn in advising. How was it for you?
Yeah, there's so many layers, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think for me, it was I think I felt confident in my skill set of like, I can have a conversation with students and we can talk about what are your goals and how are you with this and where are your strengths, and kind of connecting them to coursework and folks on campus. But the key thing for me was there was more pressure in that what I tell this young person, is going to affect them, like for the rest of their lives. Like it's really just that causes you some sleeplessness and some stress because you put a lot of pressure, or I did anyway. I put a lot of pressure on myself to say, okay, so this 4-year plan, this graduation plan we're putting together here is going to impact this person's life. And so that's something that was very serious and you wanted to be just really good at. And that's not something that starts instantly. And so, yeah, there's a lot of pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I was liking when you were talking about being in admissions and how, the student when they start is different from when they leave. And it kind of relates to a part in a quote from an article that you were a part of that was in the day in the life of, an admissions employee. And so your quote in there, you said, like, whether students' personal transformation begins the first day or the first semester, I know that 4 years later, there is guaranteed to be a different person walking through the commencement ceremonies than the one I originally welcomed to our school. And, in advising, it's great because for a lot of us with caseloads, like the student we have in the beginning, we get to kind of see their growth, maybe their challenges, their successes throughout the time. And then it's like, wow, okay, now they've graduated.
Yes, that's so remarkable, right? The impact that you have as an academic advisor on this person's life. And then it becomes times whatever your caseload is too. And so it's just the impact that academic advisors have is transformational, and it's incredible. It's a great amount of power and responsibility for certain. But I think when you're an academic advisor and you have that student who asks you, pops in your office and says, "Hey, are you going to be at graduation? And I want you to meet my family, and I want to introduce you to my family, and because you've been so integral to my success here at this institution and where I go next." And so that's just incredible.
Yeah. Now, when you were at North Dakota State University, I believe when you advised computer science students, you were the sole advisor in that department. Now, at some of the other institutions you worked at as an advisor, was it the same thing, or were there multiple advisors within the department?
So I was departmental based, and so professional advisors was the terminology we used at the time. When I started in biochemistry at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, I was the sole academic advisor within that program, but of course relied on folks who had other expertise for minors and double majors and pre-professional aspirations and such. But the program grew so much that then we added staff in an advising capacity to that program. And so, but predominantly my role has been within a unit or department, and then worked a lot with faculty. And that's a different dynamic too.
Yeah, and I'm going to definitely ask you about that too. But you were mentioning growing the program, because I
Mm-hmm.
believe with the computer science students, like it was, you grew to over 400 students, and then 8% included female students. Like, how did you and the department go about growing the program?
Well, we did a fair amount of outreach. I think using, again, my recruitment and admissions background, it was pretty easy for me to put myself in front of prospective students who were visiting campus. And if you're a female and you're representing a male dominated program, that speaks volumes. And I think, in particular, the computer science department at NDSU was very conscientious of the gender dynamics within a program. And the computer science department has quite a few female faculty within it. So that speaks volumes as well to the strength of that program. Was putting female instructors in front of prospective students, but also female students. And so that helps grow the program. But doing outreach certainly is a key component, and not just high school students. It's middle school students and it's elementary students. And so I had an opportunity to be a part of our computer science students outreaching to a local elementary school where we taught students code. And we did that to second and third graders. And it was incredible. And it got students really excited and jazzed about computer science, wherever they might end up. But those types of outreach activities help promote not only the program, but also showing role models to young people.
And yeah, and you're talking about like the transferable skills in a sense too, from admissions to your job in advising. And part of me thinks like advisors should go through some sort of admissions training, because when we present, like those who work in admissions and who have had to do outreach and recruitment are constantly doing presentations and trying to engage students. And and that's, you get those skills when you actually are presenting at orientation for new students, and then when you're doing presentations throughout the term, like for first year events and things like that. So again, connecting with you from the admissions part, because I think there are some people that like, well, I'm just going to go, and when I present, I just give the information.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're
Yeah.
not engaging the student, and then the students just information goes in one ear and out the other.
Yeah. And I think retention, of course, we can't have this conversation without talking about retention. And on college campuses, it's commonly said, retention is everyone's job. And I think, of course, it's those touch points where you can get in front of students, or you can have a one-on-one experience with students. That's what helps retain students at your institution and keeps them progressing through their degree. So that's critical too.
Yeah. And earlier I mentioned faculty. And so I do want to jump to that because you co-wrote an article back in 2010, and that was called Professional Advisors and Faculty Advisors, a Shared Goal of Student Success. And in it, you wrote about ways professional advisors and faculty advisors can work together to better help our students, such as developing an advising syllabus, working together to identify career options for students, holding advising update meetings with faculty, or even having advisors individually meet with faculty. So, it's 14 years later since that article was published. So I guess for you, do you believe institutions, from your experience and from your work in NACADA, do you believe institutions are doing that, or those are still things that could or should be done?
That's a great question. It certainly was the case at the time, and I don't know that we do enough. We have enough conversations about what it could be like. I'm unfortunately think there's maybe a bit of a us versus them situation, and I'm totally against that kind of conversation, but it happens. I think the approach is collaboration and how can we work together. And I think, or was the experience for me, is that working with on the student level as an academic advisor, and then having that student move to working with faculty, that student comes to a faculty member much more informed about their career goals, but also their course selection, and have thought more about their elements of their degree plan because they've been informed by their academic advisor. And I do think that faculty realize that without that component and those conversations and the impact of an academic advisor, that student wouldn't be in as positive of a position to work with them as a faculty member without that impact. So, it's all threaded through. It's a collaborative relationship, and it needs to be collaborative because otherwise, I think the student experience is sacrificed, and that's something that we just don't want.
Let's say there's an advisor that sees the potential in this. Maybe their institution, they kind of have faculty and professional advisors separate. There's no real kind of clear line of communication or engagement. But the advisor's like, this could work. I've read Joan's article, and these are great steps I think we could do. But now that they have to convince probably their supervisor, who then has to convince their supervisor. Any advice for that advisor to kind of help make that a reality?
Well, I think your point is well taken in that you have to have buy-in, certainly by whomever your supervisor is as an advisor. If it's the dean of the college, or certainly it's the chair or unit director where you are, but I think it's also the student. I think if you can create your narrative, it helps then students essentially saying, this has created great value for me, and I need there to be this collaborative relationship. And I think that's one way to consider. I know it's difficult. I can recall asking to be a part of faculty meetings as a quote staff member, but I was really fortunate at North Dakota State. The faculty understood the relationship of the curriculum and the decisions that are made about coursework and prerequisites, and how having the input from the professional advisor within that unit informs everyone to help make the program stronger, but also the students who are in the program, they can see that pathway, and then it's a much more cohesive experience for everyone. And when that happens, everybody wins, but especially our students win.
I think I think this could work for maybe a centralized advising model. Is if you have like a lot of the advisors in the same office, they potentially could each be a liaison to a different major department, and then maybe they're doing like monthly or at least once a semester kind of meeting with that department chair, and then they could both share, hey, these are the students we're reaching out to, these are the holds we're placing, or, what else can you tell us about the major that we can then give back to the advisors and just, make sure we're all giving correct information.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Communication is key.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, as an advisor, you are very active in NACADA. Can you talk about some of the roles that you had?
I would love to. So my work in Nebraska and my work in North Dakota all placed me in Region 6. And what I recall being aware of NACADA when I spent time in Nebraska, and certainly wanted to try to be a part of the region conference experience because that at the time was where professional development could be funneled toward, and so I thought, well, the first thing I need to do is go to a region conference and present something. And so in order for me to feel like I knew where to start, I first volunteered to be a reader for region proposals because I did not really have a good idea of what I needed to prepare as far as the proposal. And so that is where I started. And that proved to be valuable for me, certainly, but also was a great way for me to volunteer from where I was, for my office setting. And that seemed like kind of a pretty easy place to start. But it was a win-win. So self-serving, I recognized, right? Because I was also trying to educate myself on submitting a good conference proposal. But I started there and then presented at region conferences and then ended up moving to North Dakota, where I asked, hey, is there anybody on campus who knows anything about NACADA? And was lucky enough to get to know some folks on campus and connect there. And that's the thing about academic advisors is you've got a network. You've got to figure out who's in your support circle, and that's no matter where you go. And that's very similar to NACADA for me, is creating your circle, creating your network. And so I got more involved in NACADA by being on the region steering committee because there was a state liaison position that became available, and I raised my hand and thought I could maybe give that a whirl. And so spent some time on the steering committee. I also had an opportunity to be a mentor through the RAMP program. And so that was a really great experience for me to be a part of the region mentoring program. I loved that experience. I loved having a mentee and learned a lot from my mentee, and hope she learned a couple things from me too. And then as what happens in this association is there are always ample opportunities to get involved. So I had an opportunity to plan a drive-in nearby my institution, and so put together a drive-in opportunity for academic advisors to come in, learn, and then head back home. And then I had an opportunity in 2014 when the annual conference came to Minneapolis, Minnesota. I had an opportunity to be on the annual conference committee proposal chair. So that was really fun and a great way to be a part of NACADA and to volunteer. And most of that could be done from my office space, and then had an opportunity to attend the annual conference in 2014. That served as a great opportunity for me to then the next year plan the region conference. And so those opportunities just keep coming and going and threading their way through. And I am so lucky. I feel lucky to be part of an association that pulls together and wants what's best for anyone who's attending a region conference or an annual conference. And it's just been really fun to be a part of those volunteer opportunities. And so now I am seeing the other side of that from the executive office standpoint. But as a member, as a volunteer, especially in my region, but also throughout the association. Those chances to be involved are ones that I will always value and treasure and be grateful for.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great segue in terms of what led you to going from being an academic advisor to all of a sudden being in the NACADA Executive Office.
Yeah, that's another transition opportunity for me. So I found myself moving to Manhattan, Kansas, and knew full well that NACADA was based here. And so had looked at advising opportunities here in the area, but also made an outreach to Charlie Nutt, who was currently the executive director, and just said, I'm moving to Manhattan. If there are any opportunities, maybe perhaps we could have a conversation. And just so happened the timing was such that the Region Review project had just gotten together, and their goals and survey and needed a little bit of project management. And so I came on board in the executive office to work on the Region Review. Got to meet wonderful people here in the executive office who are very committed to this association and what it does, and supporting all of the work of NACADA. But then also folks outside of my region experience who on a global scale were being a very integral part of the Region Review, and also just wanting to promote the association as well.
And now, your role, you're assistant director for member engagement, but then you're also coordinator of things, liaison of things. Can you talk about what your role entails?
I know. What all do you do here? Just a couple things. So my formal role here, my title is Assistant Director for Member Engagement, but I work primarily in member engagement and leadership development. And I work with our 14,000 members, just as everyone here in our office does, but a little bit more so. But I also liaison to a few groups that are part of our administrative division. So I liaison to the Membership Recruitment and Retention Committee and to the Sustainable NACADA Leadership Committee, as well as the Emerging Leaders Program Coordinator and the Emerging Leaders Advisory Board, just to name a few. But I'd love to talk about all of them.
Yeah, we may need a part 2 for this.
I know, right?
So do you feel like your previous experience as an academic advisor working with students, maybe the transferable skills and assists you with giving maybe a unique perspective as an executive office employee of NACADA?
Maybe, probably. You should probably do a little survey here of the executive office, but they might tire of me constantly saying, well, I wonder what our members would ask, or I wonder what our members would say. So yes, and I try not to say too many times, preface things with saying, well, when I was an academic advisor, because I don't want to be that person, but I perhaps the experiences that I had certainly as an academic advisor and at previous institutions and being a member of NACADA, I perhaps do bring a couple, little perspective to our operations here. But of course, we have folks who are very capable and always willing to have conversations, because our goal here is what's best for our members. And I am a fan of best idea wins. But we need to have the dialogue and the conversation to work through to take that big idea and move it all the way to implementation in the best way that we can.
Yeah, 100%. And so one of the things you mentioned that you oversee is the Emerging Leaders Program. And from what I hear, the Emerging Leaders Program is back from being on a sort of hiatus for a little bit. So can you talk about why the pause for the Emerging Leaders Program and what's new with the revamp?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked. We're super excited about the relaunch of the 2024 Emerging Leaders Program. So for a bit of context, right, the Emerging Leaders Program began with the Inclusion and Engagement Committee, which sought to increase and support leadership to reflect the diversity of our members. And that was really the genesis. The ELP objective is to grow NACADA leadership. We want to advance the academic advising profession, and we want to foster leaders and mentors in the association. But leadership can really start anywhere. I want to acknowledge that. We connect promising emerging leaders with mentors, supported by a curriculum and guided conversations to foster leadership growth within NACADA. So the ELP program had been going strong for 15 years. And so that says a lot. We have over 300 folks who have been part of the Emerging Leaders Program. And there was a bit of a change. We had a retirement in the executive office. We had a new executive director, and it just seemed that there might be an opportunity to just take a pause and do a little bit of an assessment to see where the program has been and where it could go. And so the Emerging Leaders Advisory Board was tasked with taking some time to look at the program. We started with contacting current and former emerging leaders and mentors to ask about their experience, their observations, and their suggestions. And so the ELP Advisory Board has spent really the last 15 months discussing, formulating, and enhancing the Emerging Leaders Program. And we're really excited that it's been relaunched. There are some changes to the program as a result. And we are really unveiled those changes, but we're moving from the paired, the one-to-one emerging leader mentor pairing to more of cohorts or teams. There'll be smaller teams, but the feedback we received from mentors and from emerging leaders was that they wanted a bit of a greater access to build a network that's bigger than what a pair might support. And that benefits everyone. It benefits our emerging leaders, but it benefits our mentors as well in connecting folks to where those opportunities might exist for leadership development. The program start is July. And so the program runs July to July. And that's not dissimilar to the original setting. It's just that we're being a bit more conscientious about having that start and stop so that there isn't maybe this kind of like hanging on past that 2-year commitment. We've developed a curriculum that would be executed through monthly virtual meetings for the first and second years of the Emerging Leaders Program, where we will talk about goal development. We will hear from leaders. We will talk about opportunities for leadership and growth on a monthly basis with that group. And there's been some changes to the funding aspect of the Emerging Leaders Program. We have moved to a need-based funding availability. We recognize that some folks may have professional development funding support from their institution, where others may not, and would need to complete, once accepted into the program, what we're calling a funding request form for expenses based upon their demonstrated need. So asking folks where their need is and to let us know so that could be reviewed for funding. We also added for our mentors, this was based upon very important feedback from current and former ELP mentors, but to have access to request to have their annual conference registration fee paid as part of their role as an emerging leader mentor within the program. So the requirement of those selected to attend the annual conference in their first year is still a component, or is a main component of the ELP relaunch. We will do a formal orientation and goal setting at that first group meeting that will happen at the annual conference. But we don't require folks to attend other conferences. And maybe that had been sort of required or understood earlier. So the ELP cohort applications and materials are all online and being accepted through May 15th.
All right. And when you say those that are in the program, it's July to July, we're talking July, like 2 years. So like those for July 2024 through July 2026, right?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's a great clarification.
And then also a supervisory letter or supervisor letter?
There is. Yeah, that's new this year. We have two supervisor related items that were added. One is really an information sheet, so that if you're someone who is considering applying to the program and you would want to talk with your supervisor about the feasibility of that and support from that supervisor, there is an information sheet that you can provide that talks about the expectations of the Emerging Leaders Program so that it can be very transparent for you and for your supervisor. And then secondarily, a part of the application process is supervisor letter. We have a template that we provide, so it's just, it's more of an acknowledgement from a supervisor standpoint so that supervisors understand, again, what the requirements are for the program to support our emerging leaders when selected.
Now, I'm sure you probably have gotten this question or will from multiple people. So let's say someone's going through and they're like, this sounds like a great program. I would really want to do it. And, I've read over kind of what's expected, but the 2-year commitment, 2 years, it just seems like so long. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing in, 6 months. What's your advice to someone that's like on the fence of applying, but maybe they're just concerned about that, the 2-year part?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we need to be transparent, and I think we need to understand the process in that if we are fostering leadership for our future NACADA leaders, that does take time. They're for elected and appointed positions, for chairs, advisor boards, and such. There's an election process, and so getting folks familiar with what's the timeline of that process, what does that look like, what is expected of me as a potential candidate in that nomination process, and just that does take a little bit of time to sort of understand where you want to go, and then what are the steps needed, because oftentimes it's being a member of a particular committee for a period of time before then that chair option becomes something that's available to you for to be elected to. And so that's part of sort of the learning process, and our role through the ELP is to connect folks to kind of is it research that you're headed toward? Is it in a region? Is it in an advising community? Is it in the administrative division? Where do you see those opportunities? But I think it's one thing to ask someone right away, where do you think you're headed? Like, what are your goals in the next 2 years? It's also having a conversation about, well, did you know about the region division and all the options that are available for leadership? And so, or the advising communities and all of the roles that are available for leadership, because we do, I think, our folks a disservice if we don't first have those conversations. And then it becomes I can make an informed decision as an emerging leader as to where I'm going to set my goals so that I can make my mark and provide myself with the pathway to leadership within the association. And so that takes time. And so that 2-year commitment is there predominantly for that particular reason.
Yeah. Now, let's say someone applies and let's say they don't get accepted. Is that kind of like a be-all, end-all, or can they apply for the following year?
Yes. So it's not an end-all, be-all. And there will be more applications, we anticipate, than we have space. And I'm that's unfortunately, is kind of where we're at, but also fortunately, because we want the strength of the program to be our folks who are part of the program. And so we are looking for demonstrated leadership wherever you are right now. And whether it's on your campus and you're wanting to transition to leadership within NACADA, or if you've been involved in NACADA and you want to work your way toward other leadership opportunities within NACADA. But we're looking for that application to detail for us what you have been doing as far as leadership. However you define that on your campus and where you are in your professional growth. And so it might seem a bit vague for us to be asking you to indicate, but that's purposeful as to not dictate to you the check mark. There's not a checklist of, did this person have this one thing and did they list this other thing? It's, what have you demonstrated as far as leadership that we can say, here's someone who has some leadership experience who would be a great candidate for the Emerging Leaders Program. But yes, if you are not selected in your first year, please continue to hold on to that information, add to it in the next year, show us some growth and additional leadership so that strengthens your application in the future.
Now, for the mentor, kind of going along with that, is there, sometimes I think there's a misconception that, if I wasn't in the Emerging Leaders Program, I can't apply as a mentor.
Thank you for asking that, because it is not expected that a mentor within the program has been someone who's been a part of the Emerging Leaders Program. We have a mix, of course, in our mentor grouping of folks who are quite familiar, having been an emerging leader, but also folks who just who are great mentors, who didn't maybe have an opportunity or it wasn't available to them at the time, but they are folks who are in a position to foster leadership among our association. And our mentors are just incredible people who are also very busy and very involved, but that's where they want to give their time and energy, is as a mentor to the Emerging Leaders Program. And I applaud that sense of duty and passion that those folks have.
And I know we're getting close to time, so I'm going to learn one more question. And are there any updates you can share regarding the Sustainable NACADA Leadership Committee?
Right. So Sustainable NACADA Leadership has been working hard behind the scenes. They are focused on building that next generation of NACADA leadership. And so that the Sustainable Leadership Committee has been developing content for elected and appointed leaders to access content to help them prepare for their leadership role. And predominantly that has been seen in our leadership onboarding course for newly elected or appointed leaders. And that content, which helps prepare folks for their leadership role, is a new initiative. And this group is also has formed additional subcommittees to look into expanding to add programs that are developing new leaders, but also information for advanced leaders within the association. So those are initiatives that the Sustainable Leadership Committee is working on.
Well, I feel like this was a great interview. I learned a lot more about you, and hopefully listeners as well know more about your background, your why, being in the NACADA Executive Office, the great things going on, the Emerging Leaders Program. Hopefully a lot of people end up applying either as an emerging leader or as a mentor. You know, I can definitely attest to the positivity of the program and things that come out of it and what you gain from it, and also expanding and pushing NACADA forward. So Joan Krush, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Matt.